With us now we have Tobias Thornblad, who is the CEO of MS&C Nordics, as well as the chairman of the board of BioStock. Tobias also happens to be an expert on Biotech Valuation, and he's here today to talk about a brand new book on the subject, which he has co-written together with co-founder of MS&C Nordics and current CEO of Monocle, Björn Karlsson. Tobias, very nice to have you here today. Can you start by telling me a little bit about the background of this book you've written?
Yes, so over the years we've probably done hundreds of valuations across almost any type of therapeutic area. And we've seen a lot of good examples, but we've also seen a lot of bad examples. So Björn and I, we decided that we should write a book where we actually capture best practice in how to do valuations, and at the same time create a textbook where we capture the valuation benchmarks and statistics that are useful when conducting valuations.
And many of the companies presenting here at the summit are early stage companies. When in the lifespan of a biotech company would you say it's the best time to do a valuation?
So usually I recommend that they start as early as possible. And the reason for that is that valuation, it forces you to really define your target patient population. But it also forces you to define your competitive position. And by putting dollar values on it, you will also know whether you have a return on investment or not, and if you actually should invest in a drug towards commercialization.
Yeah, and for someone who has no experience or little experience in doing these things, valuation, how would you get started?
Well, I would say that you should start simple. And the best way is to start by estimating the size of your market and the value of your business opportunity. The size of your market, the way that I would start would be to look at epidemiology. So in terms of your patient population, is it best defined by prevalence or incidence? And what target geographies do you think would be the most relevant for your addressable market? So then you have the volume of patients and the total market size. Now what you need to find out is what is the value of this. So the way that you can go about is either that you look at competing products and what they charge. If that's not possible, you could have a look at what's the alternative cost of not addressing the unmet clinical need which you are targeting.
So assessing the market size is of course important from a company perspective as well as from an investor perspective looking at a case. What other factors do you need to consider before you can sort of reach a valuation?
Yeah, so when you have your business, the value of your business opportunity, what you need to think about is the timeline. So where are you sitting right now, and what's the timeline in order for you to get to a market approval? And then you need to find out what are the studies that are needed and what are the costs of those. So when you chart this out in a spreadsheet, you will have cash flows that are initially negative and then hopefully in the end positive. And then the only thing you need to apply for this is to discount these cash flows and then sum them up. So then you will arrive at the net present value and you will know sort of the valuation right now.
And of course, it should be said that valuating a company on the fundamental data of the company and so on is quite different than valuating a stock on the stock market. But in general, what would be the key differences doing a valuation from a company from the biotech sector, for example, compared with other industries?
Yeah, so I think one of the key differences with the biotech sector is obviously the long development time that you have until you reach the market approval. Then you also have the uncertainty of not getting there. So you will, when you have a net present value, you will need to risk adjust it in some way. And there are a lot of benchmarks that are available that you can use in order to know what the likelihood of approval is from where you're sitting right now until you actually reach the market. And that can be based on your development stage, your indication category, or possibly the molecule type that you're developing.
And this all seems like a fairly complicated process altogether. How do you know that the calculated value is the right value?
Well, I would say you never know that it's the right value. And some people would say that it's more of an art than a science. However, if you make reasonable and conservative assumptions based on objective data and good statistics, then it's going to be difficult to argue that you're completely wrong. So you will have a strong foundation for evaluation, and then the rest comes down to negotiation skills.
And speaking of negotiation skills, then what would you say, with your experience, what are the most common mistakes that people make in these processes?
I think one of the mistakes that we see occur quite frequently is that companies start too late with the valuation process. So some companies that contact us, they already have received a term sheet from the strategic partner. And at that stage, we can do evaluations to check what the value of that term sheet will be. But the freedom to change those terms might be limited at that stage. So it's usually a better idea to do your homework first and then work proactively and probably propose the terms that you want. In our experience, you get better terms by doing it like that.
And something that often comes in focus when you see deals presented in the media, for example, that's upfront value and also the subsequent milestones, different development milestones. What can you say about these parameters in general?
Yeah, so a good way to think about it is if you have a valuation, so then you have a total value. So then the question becomes, how should you split this with the partner? How much should the biotech company get and how much should the pharma company get? And this will obviously depend a lot on what you put into your deal structure. And everything that comes early on is worth a lot more because it's not discounted as heavily. So an upfront is worth a lot more in a model like this. So if you negotiate very, very strongly that you want upfronts, then you're going to have a smaller deal size as a total deal for you as a biotech company. And it might be smart in many ways to negotiate a more backloaded deal where you have really high royalties, because that might mean that the company gets more profit in the end from the compound that you're out licensing.
That is provided that you are confident and that your asset will actually go the whole way to market, for example.
Exactly. So if you really, really strongly believe in your product, that could be a very smart way to negotiate so that you get more profit out of it in the end. And that would probably be a backloaded deal.
So in general then, as an investor looking from the outside in, so to speak, when you see a deal presented by a company that you're invested in and you can see that the upfront might not be that substantial, although the high milestones in the backload, as you say. So that's nothing to be really disappointed about then.
Well, it depends on the total structure, of course, but just having a small upfront doesn't mean that it's a bad deal. It could be a fantastic deal. The milestones could be great later on, as well as the royalties, and that's usually where the big money will come in the end.
And you said that it's all about the deal structure and difference in how you split the deal between the partners. Is there anything you can say about a general sort of scope? Where would a company be satisfied if you're going to out-license, for example, to a big pharma company? Is it, can you get a 50-50 deal? Can you get is it a 20-80 deal? What would be good in your opinion?
It's very case-by-case basis, but I would say companies in preclinical stage, I would say that in our experience at least, they will get somewhere between 10 to perhaps 20%, something like that, sometimes even more, whereas a clinical company might get a bigger piece of that cake. So if it's early clinical phase, perhaps somewhere between 20 to 40 perhaps, and then you can obviously negotiate even more if you're in phase 3 or later.
So later stages, higher values because it's less risk for the taker, so to speak.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, okay. Super interesting to hear about this. So my final question would be then, to conclude, how can biotech professionals and investors alike learn more about valuation, you would say?
Yeah, so we do get this question quite a lot. Obviously, the best way is to get a lot of real-world practice. That's not always possible. So there is some literature on the subject, not a lot when it comes to biotech. That's partly why we wrote the book. But we do offer valuation courses as one way to learn more. And if anyone would be interested, feel welcome to contact me or any of my colleagues or go to mscnordics.com and you'll find more info.
And is it also possible to buy this book as an investor, layman?
Yes, absolutely, and that will be the same thing. So just visit our website, and that will be available there.
Good concrete advice. Sorry. Thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.